Okay, so I just got back from work. I was looking over the gearbox a little bit more, second checking myself, and I found a hidden issue. And when I say hidden issue, it's basically one that's hard to find, and you just have to kind of think really hard, you know, where this resistance could be, some of this resistance. And this is probably not the actual part of the resistance I'm looking for, but I'm going to describe how I found this. First off, I've always known that, you know, as the piston goes through here, there's a possibility that the back pickup, since it's a lot thicker, it can hit the sector gear. Now, when I first tested this, I just put this together and held this as tight as I could, and then rotated or pushed through the piston. Now, when I did this, I didn't see the sector gear moving, but I noticed that when I held the piston and put downward force on it, if I had did that, if I pushed down on the piston with downward force and moved it back like this, I could move the sector gear, and I could feel the resistance of that. It was not completely bad, but you know, it was snagging a little bit. So what I did was I opened it up here, went ahead and took my Dremel and just basically grinded this down until it didn't do that anymore. Now, how did I think like that? What was I doing? When you have a spring, it's kind of going to move any way that it wants to. You know, your piston's going to move like this any way that it wants to. The guide rails are the only thing that kind of keep it straight with the cylinder head and the O-ring in the cylinder, or excuse me, the piston head with the O-ring into the cylinder as this is moving back and forth. So that's the only things that really keep it straight. However, with the spring, you have to remember that mobility is going to be there. I mean, it's going to try to move. So I was thinking, you know, what if the piston was moving, you know, with this downward force? I mean, can these rails provide enough space for this to move down and tap the sector gear? And yes, they could. So, you know, you got to think these kind of things to find something like this, because normally that wouldn't have been found. You know, when I first looked through it and I checked it, no, it's fine. But then when I went back to recheck it and make sure that, you know, I double check, is there any other way that I could be wrong? And I realized, well, maybe there's a possibility this thing is moving, and you know, it could hit the sector gear, in which it was. So coming down to the spring. Now, this kind of thought can be the same thing with these gears. The gears can still tend to shift a little bit. They either go left or right with the spring, so they're just going to be moving, you know. That's why when I do shimming, I always check both sides of the gearbox shell. I look for anything that can obstruct because of this movement. You know, it can move back and forth, and it could tap another gear. It's too close together, and that can grind the teeth into another gear. So you have to constantly be looking at these things before you finish your install and you're ready and saying you're done. But I thought that was really interesting, and you just have to think, you know, be more like the gearbox, and this is kind of a sign of that. So that's hidden issue number 1 found and removed.